Hello, my name is Patrick Usher, and in this video I want to talk about the importance of cardiovascular reconditioning in recovering from POTS. Now, normally in my videos I don't talk very much about cardiovascular reconditioning, although I have always stressed its importance as a factor in recovering from the secondary effects of having POTS syndrome. I do not believe that deconditioning in and of itself causes the condition that we know of as POTS. It certainly can cause a whole host of health problems, but it does not cause what I believe when we see people who present with POTS, what they actually have. And rather, I believe it is a secondary factor, which is a necessary consequence of having such a devastating condition which affects the autonomic nervous system, which is what, of course, POTS does. So people get POTS and then they can't exercise because of that. So it's not a primary cause, but its secondary effects are nevertheless considerable. And so I want to talk today about the importance of cardiovascular reconditioning. Now, this is important because a lot of the time people who have POTS, and let's say they are following the dynamic neural retraining system to recover, they may worry after 3 or 4 months, as to why their heart rate, hasn't fully come down back to normal yet. They're not getting that nice 10 to 20 sustained increase from supine to standing, which is indicative of complete recovery from POTS. And it may simply be because they haven't got around to doing some proper cardiovascular reconditioning yet after their months or years of illness, which will have necessitated long periods of bed rest potentially, and in some cases total bed rest. So it may just be that. So I think my sense is that sometimes people see that their overall supine to standing heart rate's coming down, the blood vessels are healing up, they're not having the constant release of adrenaline, which causes the heart to beat faster, and so on. But they're still kind of not below POTS criterion, the POTS criterion of plus or minus 30 beats, plus or equal to 30 beats per minute from supine to standing. So they worry as to why they're not there yet. And I'm saying the answer may just be that they are cardiovascularly deconditioned. And to that end, I want to give a personal story, which I think will be helpful. Now, I recovered from POTS I'd say fully 5 or 6 months after I started the brain rewiring program. So I started that in May 2015. I felt I was fully recovered by October, November 2015. And by fully recovered, I mean consistently 10 to 20 beats per minute from supine to standing. And so I felt grand, okay? Now, fast forward 10 months from then to August of last year, when I was in France. Now, my dad lives in France, and I was staying with him at that point. And towards the end of August 2016, there was a heat wave. Now, I dislike the heat, and I especially dislike heat waves. And next summer, I vow to be in Ireland, not in America. Because an Irish summer is usually quite pleasant when the sun comes out at all. But anyway, so stay on topic, Patrick. So there was a heat wave for a whole week. Okay, it was quite substantial, and during that week, the heat makes me lazy. I became lazy. I didn't want to take any exercise. Up until that point, I've been going on some very, very long walks, 12-kilometer walks, and I was really enjoying that. But during this particular week, I did nothing. I would move to get food and toddle around the house a little, but I was doing very little exercise for a week. I just lost the motivation, and the heat meant that you couldn't really do it unless you wanted to get up very early or exercise late at night. It wasn't even possible to do anything in the house. It was too hot there as well. So I just became pretty immobile for that week. Okay. And towards the end of that week, I thought, okay, well, Patrick, let's just, out of a matter of interest, check our supine standing heart rate, which is not something that I was doing very often after I'd recovered, and it's not something I do very often now. But I did it then, and I was shocked and terrified and incredibly anxious, because my supine heart rate was 70 and my standing heart rate was 107. Right, so there's an increase of plus 37. So I was thinking, oh my God, I have POTS again. This is terrible. I'm bunched, and yet I felt fine. I didn't have any of the symptoms of POTS. I was a little weak from not doing very much for a week, but I certainly didn't have any of the devastating symptoms of POTS that I had when I was sick with it. Where a 5-minute walk was a dangerous thing to do, and a good day was filling the dishwasher. That wasn't the scenario. And so I calmed myself down and said, Patrick, maybe this is just the effects of not doing very much for a week. Maybe you've become pretty unfit over the course of this 1 week. And so I said, let's relax, let's put away the blood pressure and heart rate machine, and now that the heat wave is about to pass, let's get back to our normal exercises and walking and physio stuff that I do for the next week, and we'll take the readings again then. And we won't panic until that point. Anyway, lo and behold, to cut that story short, a week later I did the same results, and the result was completely normal. Right. So I'd regained that cardiovascular reconditioning, basic cardiovascular reconditioning, very quickly. So my point in saying this is that there is a considerable degree, or a considerable portion of, if you are recovering from POTS using the DNRS program, and you're noticing that there's still this increase, significant increase in heart rate, a considerable factor in that heart rate increase is simply deconditioning. And that can go away really quickly. Now, obviously, in this particular case, I had been fairly fit up until my apathetic week, but nevertheless, you can get better in a basic way in terms of cardiovascular reconditioning from such deconditioning very quickly. I'm not talking about immediately going and running a marathon. I'm just talking about the basic cardiovascular reconditioning. That means that when you stand up, you get that normal 10 to 20 sustained increase. And I want to read you a story to give you hope that it's not just when you've been that when you've had a week off from exercising, that this heart rate increase will occur, but also and that you can recover very quickly from that, but also that you can recover very quickly even if you've had a longer period of bed rest. Okay, so this is the story of someone who, for research, was paid $18,000 to stay in bed for 70 days and not get up. And this was research done by NASA, and I have a link to it in the box below. I have a link to the person's subjective account of it. And why anyone would want to do this, I don't know, because it's devastating for your health. And I think $18,000 is not enough compensation, but that's another point. Anyway, he describes in this article what happened the moment after 70 days of being in bed, what happened when he was tilted to a vertical position. So they actually strapped him onto a tilt table because they didn't think he was in a position to actually get up himself. He was too weak. So he wrote, "As soon as the bed was tilted to the vertical position, my legs felt heavier than ever before. My heart started to beat at 150 beats per minute. My skin became itchy. I was covered in sweat. Blood rushed into my legs, expanding the veins that had become increasingly elastic throughout the past several months of bed rest. I felt like I was going to faint. I was fighting to remain standing from the start, and it only became more difficult. Around the 8-minute mark, my pulse dropped from 150 down to 70. My body was about to collapse. As my vision started to go black, the staff saw my numbers drop on the machines and promptly returned the bed to the horizontal position. It was only later that they told me that none of the NASA bed rest subjects have lasted the full 15 minutes. Okay, so some really interesting things here. The first is that after 70 days of bed rest, this person's heart rate immediately jumped to 150 beats per minute upon standing again for the first time. So obviously some of that is an increase due to the tilt table test, because when you're standing, it forces more muscle use. But anyway, but nevertheless, it's jumping up hugely, and that's encouraging actually, because if you had a long period of bed rest with POTS, and you're finally addressing the root cause by using the DNRS to rewire the limbic system out of trauma, then you can know that a large part of your heart rate increase is actually from the secondary effects of the cardiovascular deconditioning, not just the limbic system crisis and the blood vessel dysfunction from that, which I talk about in other videos. So a large part of it is from deconditioning, and you can't reverse that overnight. It mightn't take very long, but it doesn't happen overnight. So if you're kind of thinking, oh well, I've been doing the DNRS for several months and my heart rate's still increasing by 40 from supine to standing. It used to increase by 60 or 70 or whatever, and now it's 40. I'm not making enough progress. The DNRS won't get you there on its own. It does rewire the root cause, but you also need, at some point, when you're able and willing and ready to start it, to get cardiovascularly fit again, because that's the last stretch. Right? That's the last stretch, and it can happen really quickly, but it can also go away more quickly than you realize. This person, whom I just quoted, talking about this experiment that he had endured, wrote also in the same article, by the end of the 2-week post-bed rest period, I felt 95% physically normal. I was ready to go. So after 70 days of not moving and staying in bed, well, he may have moved a little bit, but he stayed in bed for 70 days, and 2 weeks of reconditioning after the period of bed rest, he felt 95% physically normal. Okay, so that's massive, right? The physical reconditioning can happen more quickly than we might think. In my book, POTS, What It Really Is and Why It Happens, I talk about 2 phases of recovery. The first is the brain rewiring for 6 months and a very good diet and building up physical activity as able. Starting to go for walks, if you've been in bed a long time, starting with a 5-minute walk a day, then a 10-minute walk the next week per day, and so on, building up, and hopefully by the end of your period getting to kind of an hour a day, in addition to doing household things and keeping busy, and also maybe things like yoga or Pilates or physical therapy, that kind of stuff. And that will massively help with cardiovascular reconditioning. But the second phase I talk about then is when you drop the brain rewiring stuff, if you want to, and if you're feeling comfortable to do that, and then you focus more on the cardiovascular reconditioning to really remove that final hurdle. And I'd be very surprised if once someone has recovered from the limbic system impairment aspect and the blood vessels have healed up, I'd be very surprised if 3 months sensible, moderate cardiovascular reconditioning did not return the supine to standing heart rates completely to normal, i.e. 10 to 20 beats per minute upon standing. Very surprised indeed. So that's kind of what I want to say about that. Cardiovascular reconditioning, a really important thing to recover from the secondary effects of having such a devastating illness which denies the possibility of exercise unless you're unless you have an amazing willpower and ability to cope with the effects of exercising when you have POTS. For most people, it's not possible, really. So, but the thing is, really important once you have rewired the root cause to get back to being active and to build up your activity as you're able, as you recover, and also to take heart that a large part of your increase in heart rate will be due to this, and that you shouldn't panic if the DNRS isn't bringing down your heart rates enough. If it's bringing them down at all, it means it's addressing the first issues, the release of adrenaline, which is affecting the heart, and as the months go by, also healing the blood vessel dysfunction. It's addressing those, addressing the first thing and allowing the second thing to happen, and that's all an amazing sign if those scores are going down. But you can't get the final push to the normal heart rate scores until you have become cardiovascularly fit, and that is something to take heart from. It's a good thing, and as I talked about in my story, 1 week of doing nothing and suddenly my heart rate was jumping 37 beats per minute, and then a week later, after normal exercising, again it was back down to normal, so between 10 to 20 beats. And so that can happen quickly. It's happened for this NASA study fellow within 2 weeks. He felt 95% normal. Again, it can happen quickly. But do build sensibly, do build moderately, do build under the advice of a physician or some sort of expert that you may be able to contact in reconditioning after a period of bed rest. And know that this is an important part of recovery, that your heart rate scores will really come down when you get to this aspect of recovery, and take heart from that. So thank you very much, and I wish you a pleasant day.